Welcome to session 1 in my All About Bees Honeybee Behaviour video collection. Today I'll be introducing you to the different members of the honeybee colony, covering their life cycles and looking at the natural cycle of the colony throughout the year. If you are enjoying these videos, please click the like and subscribe button below and you won't miss out on any new video releases. You can support my channel by buying me a beer or donating to my PayPal page. The links are in the banner at the top of the page. And I also welcome any comments or questions. Most of you will know this, but I'm going to start with the basics for any new beekeepers. There is one queen in a colony of honeybees, and she is the mother of all the bees. There can be up to 60,000 workers, females, in a large colony, and between 300 to 2,000 drones, which are the males. The queen is a fertile female who mates with a number of drones and whose mission in life is to lay eggs. She is in fact an egg-laying machine and responds to being fed royal jelly by the worker bees by laying eggs, and she can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. The queen produces pheromones that aid colony cohesion and reduce the swarming impulse, the main one being a queen substance. Here we have a nice looking queen laying an egg in a cell. She has a longer abdomen than the workers, so she can lay the eggs in the base of the cell, and she is followed around the nest by a court of worker bees who are constantly licking and grooming her and also touching her with their antennae. The workers are always sharing food, and this is known as trophallaxis, and this is how the queen substance is distributed around the colony. Workers are infertile females, and they perform a number of different roles in the colony based on their age and the development of certain glands. Newly emerged bees will spend the first few days cleaning up cells, but when 3 days old they will have well-developed mandibular and hypopharyngeal glands, producing lots of brood food and royal jelly, so they will be feeding developing larvae and the queen. At about 9 days old, the wax glands are developed, so they will be making beeswax and building comb. At the same time, they will be receiving nectar from forages and processing it into honey. At about 18 days old, their sting comes into play, and as venom production is at its peak, they perform guard duty at the hive entrance. After 21 days, the bees' hypopharyngeal and mandibular glands degenerate and the bees become foragers, collecting pollen, nectar, water and propolis. Drones are male bees and they have no sting. Their sole purpose in life is to mate with the virgin queen, and any that do die in the process. So any you see in the hive haven't contributed towards colony life at all. Drones have an easy life within the honeybee colony, but I believe they do get a bad press for this. A perfect day for a sexually mature drone is to have a lie-in and then find some worker bees to feed him breakfast. He'll then make his way to the hive entrance at about noon, and if it's a fine day, he'll groom his antenna and fueled up for flight, he will fly off to look for a queen to mate with. If unsuccessful, he'll return to the hive for a late lunch, rest for a while, and maybe go out for another queen hunt later in the afternoon. He has to make the best of things, as the drones are evicted by the workers in late summer, and you will notice lots of dead drones outside the hive entrance. This is perfectly normal, so don't panic, and it is in fact usually a good sign, as it means there is a queen in the colony going into winter. So this is the common sight in autumn outside the hive entrance, but it is just a cycle of life in the honeybee colony. If, by the way, you do see drones flying in and out of your hive in late autumn or on a fine winter's day, it is likely but not certain that you have a drone-laying queen or no queen at all, as the bees have allowed drones to live. All being well, in spring the bees will produce more drones and it will all start again. For those of you taking beekeeping exams, a common question is, how many castes are there in a honeybee colony? The correct answer is 2. It's the queen and the worker. The drone is not a caste. There are always beekeepers who will argue that the answer is 3, so I contacted eminent bee professor Tom Seeley and asked him the question. Here is his answer. There are 2 sexes and 2 female castes. The definition of caste comes from E.O. Wilson in his book The Insect Societies. It reads as follows. A caste, broadly defined as any set of individuals of a particular morphological type or age group or both that perform specialized labor in the colony. We generally do not consider drones a caste because they don't work in the colony. For honeybees, it is recognized that there are two physical castes, queens and workers, and that there are four age subcastes among the workers, being cell cleaners, nurse bees, food storers, comb builders, and foreigners. Best wishes, Tom. So, there you have the correct answer, and don't be persuaded otherwise. How long do bees live? Well, on average, queens live for 3 to 4 years, workers 42 days, and drones 20 to 40 days. The exception, of course, with the workers is that the bees emerging in autumn, known as winter bees, will live all winter, semi-hibernating in the hive, so actually live for 6 months or more. Let's have a look at the development of an egg. The queen lays an egg in the base of a polished cell. The egg hatches and young worker bees feed the larva. The larvae reaches full growth and the bees then cap the cell. The larvae within the cell spins a cocoon and becomes a pupa, and then, miraculously, a beautifully fully formed adult bee chews its way through the capping and leaves the cell. So this is a photograph of an egg laid by the queen. Just for your information, when the queen first lays the egg, it stands upright like this, but after a day or so, it falls over on its side and then hatches after 3 days. Here are the stages in the life cycle of a worker, queen, and drone. Again, if taking exams, you probably need to learn the various stages in the life cycle shown here. All eggs take 3 days to hatch, and from egg laying to emergence for a worker bee is 21 days. A queen is 16 days and a drone is 24 days. You really need to understand these timescales as well practically, as it will benefit you in your beekeeping, and if you don't learn them, it'll be a hindrance to you. Here we can see a newly emerged worker bee leaving her cell. Notice how grey and fluffy she is. Beautiful, I would say, but I'm biased. She needs to find a nectar-filled cell to strengthen her and will then get on with her first job of cleaning cells. These newly emerged bees cannot fly and have no sting. Over the next few days they will lose their fluffiness as they harden off. Now let's have a look at the normal population cycle in a honeybee colony. Population depends on the presence of a properly mated queen who's laying well, available forage, the weather, the time of the year, has a swarm issued recently, and of course on the overall health of the colony. The queen is very important, as without a queen in the colony, they are often doomed. Ideally, you want a young, prolific queen laying a good brood pattern and between 1,000 and 2,000 eggs per day in a good spring nectar flow. This is an amazing statistic and equates to her own body weight, so she requires lots of feeding from the workers. This graph shows colony population throughout the year, with the solid blue line the adult bees and the dotted green line the brood. There is a gradual decline in the adult population in winter as bees will be dying every day, until a minimum worker population exists in March. The critical period for the bees is between February and April, and if they can survive through this, there is a dramatic rise in numbers from April onwards as they build up numbers on the spring nectar flow. The colony will reach a population peak of about 60,000 bees in late June, early July, after which the queen will reduce her laying, coinciding with the end of the summer flowers, and the colony will go into winter with no brood at all. Interestingly, this chart compares a colony that has swarmed to one that hasn't. The blue line shows the colony that hasn't swarmed as discussed previously, but if we look at the pink line, we can see big differences in the population. The swarm colony builds up on the spring nectar flow and then swarms, reducing the population drastically. It does rapidly build up again, but does so on the income from the main summer forage, before going into winter with similar numbers to the colony that didn't swarm. If you can prevent or use a swarm control technique to prevent the loss of a swarm, you will maximise your honey harvest. Please have a look at my swarm prevention and control videos for more information on this. So let's recap what happens from winter into spring. There is a minimum worker population in March, with winter bees dying daily. The critical period for the bees is February to April, as brood rearing is underway. and if they can't forage due to poor weather, they won't be able to feed the larvae and the colony can starve to death. So, for you as a beekeeper, keep an eye on your bees at this time, and if necessary, feed them with fondant. The spring flowers give a dramatic population rise from April onwards, often climaxing in swarming. It is always a joyous sight for the beekeeper to see pollen going into the hive on a warm spring day, as it usually means there is a queen present that has been laying and larvae are being fed. The word used for a prolific queen who heads up large colonies is fecund, and fecundity is one of the criteria I use to select when queen rearing. Why is this important? Well, you need large numbers of bees, foragers during peak nectar time to collect you a lot of honey. Fecund or not, however, her laying rate will depend also on the age and condition of the queen. An older queen generally reduces her laying rate as she ages. The queen, as I've said before, is an egg-laying machine, but she won't lay eggs unless there is a flow on or you feed the colony syrup. The nest environment can also affect the laying rate, for example, a wet floor or a hole in the hive. The overall health of the colony also comes into play, so make sure you treat for varroa at the correct times and carry out disease inspections at least once in late summer. And of course, I've already told you that the queen will reduce her egg laying in autumn and winter. Here's a good tip for you when assessing your queen's egg laying rate. You should be seeing 1 egg to 2 larvae to 4 of sealed brood, and that's a good brood pattern showing that the queen is being laying well in a good flow. But any empty cells or gaps in the pattern tells you something is wrong, or maybe there's been some poor weather in the weeks leading up to preventing foraging. Nurse bees form the retinue around the queen, and these bees change often. They feed her brood food, which is royal jelly, and some honey, and if she isn't fed, she won't lay. According to Winston and Biology of the Honeybee, feeding is regular. 2 to 26 eggs are laid between feeding. Usually only one worker feeds the queen and it lasts about 40 seconds per feed, and she receives about 5 feeds per hour. There is a maximum population in July. As I said, it could be up to 60,000 bees depending on the fecundity of the queen and the strain of bee. The emerging bees are now winter bees. The queen reduces egg laying, the bees start preparing for winter. When the main flow comes to an end in autumn, the bees first of all reduce brood production, thereby conserving stores. The poor old drones are evicted about the same time, resulting in even fewer mouths to feed over winter. The colony stores honey now for winter stores, and they seal up cracks with propolis to make the hive or nest weatherproof. During the winter, as the ambient temperature outside the hive drops, the honeybee adopts 3 mechanisms to ensure its survival down to very low temperatures. These are clustering, generating their own metabolic heat, and ensuring the nest is draft-free by using propolis to fill any gaps or cracks. The last feature that enables the honeybee to survive the winter is the ability to vary its lifespan from about 6 weeks in summer to 6 months in winter. The winter bee consumes large quantities of pollen and honey, and thus develops the number of fat bodies which store glycogen, protein and fat. Vitellogenin is an important protein stored in fat bodies and hemolymph of adult bees. It is used to produce brood food and keeps bees younger so they live longer. Winter bees have the ability to develop the hypopharyngeal glands in spring, vital to produce food when brood rearing starts again. There is some thought that the queen doesn't completely stop laying eggs in winter, but she certainly starts again after the winter solstice when the days begin getting longer, and by mid-February you should see spring pollen going into the hive, a sure sign that brood is present. Needless to say, an unhealthy colony will not perform well, and dead bees produce no honey. Any disease will result in reduced forages, less food income and thus less brood. The knock-on effect is less house bees to care for brood, which results in the brood dying, not emerging from their cells. The adult bees are not being replaced and it can lead to the death of the colony. Finally, we all know that poor weather can adversely affect our bees, which is one of the reasons beekeepers are obsessed with the weather. Keeping bees in Scotland was a challenge for me due to the cooler climate, and I was always staggered at the amount of honey some of my peers keeping bees in England would harvest. To state the obvious, poor weather, whether wet or cold, can prevent foraging, meaning there is no food income in the form of nectar or pollen. This can lower the immune response of the colony, leading to disease or attack by parasites or pathogens. Undoubtedly, egg laying reduces. There is a break in brood production, leading to an imbalance later down the line, and in the worst case scenario, without beekeeper intervention, the colony can starve to death. It happens to us all, and it isn't a pleasant experience to find a starved, dead hive. So that brings me to the end of session 1. I've introduced you to the different members of the honeybee colony, covering their life cycles and looking at the natural cycle of the colony throughout the year, and how the colony responds to disease or poor weather. In session 2, I will be covering homeostasis, i.e. how the bees maintain the nest environment and temperature at relatively constant levels regardless of external conditions. If you are enjoying these videos, you can buy me a beer or make a donation to my PayPal account by following the links in the page banner. Thank you to those who have already bought me a beer. Your donation will help with the running costs. That's all for now. Adios amigos.